Okay, today is Monday, May 26, 2025. Happy Memorial Day, all right? For those that don't know, my name is Luther Wilson. I'm a real estate professional here in the Kansas City market, representing for Upside Property Services. And on this YouTube channel, I like to talk about real estate investing, and the three major aspects to it: capital, strategy, and operations, okay? And in today's session, I'm gonna dig a little bit deeper into the capital aspect again, all right? So in particular, I wanna kind of talk about and go over what it looks like when I take money or borrow money from an individual or an investor, what that looks like, you know, with when we go place capital or invest that capital via real estate, okay? So more often than not, we're gonna be using an entity of some sort, okay? For us, it's been LLCs, okay? And that is something that I talk about with my clients regularly, because a lot of the clients that I've had throughout the years, as a real estate broker, as a property manager, as a project manager, a lot of times investors don't even have an entity quite yet that they're going to be using, and we can dig deeper into that, but it's good to have an entity in the state where you own properties, okay? So that's a big part of it. But what it looks like when I've borrowed money or when I've collaborated with an investor, okay? So those are the two main ways that I've done it, all right? I'm either borrowing money from an investor or a private individual, and they're my lender, okay? In that case, I'm gonna be using my LLC, and I'm the owner of that property, and the money that the individual or the private money lender or investor loans me is gonna be secured by that property, okay? So I'm planning to buy a property, or I might already have a property in my LLC, okay? And the person loaning me money is gonna have their capital secured. So it could be in first lien position, perhaps it could be in second lien position, okay? On the flip side, what I've done a lot of as well is work with an investor, and we are essentially partners. We're business partners, and it could be structured a number of different ways. And in that case, my lender, or actually I shouldn't even call it a lender. In the second case, my partner is putting up the money, okay? And we have an LLC or an entity that we own together, okay? So that can look a number of different ways, okay? And a big part of it, whether I'm gonna be using money just for my entity and I have a private lender, okay, or if I'm working with a business partner and they put up the money and they're in on the deal where they own the property with me, okay, so much, okay, is determined by how much capital is available, all right? How much capital is available is huge, okay? And then another huge part is, what are the terms of its usage for that capital, okay? So even though, we have access to several private money lenders, hard money lenders, mortgage brokers, private individuals, other investors, a lot of times we may not be able to put that capital to use in a manner that I believe is safe and secure, and it's gonna help me and my partner, my team, however that's set up, reach our goals, okay? Because so often the money that investors have access to is available on a short-term basis, meaning that, okay, we're gonna loan you, $150,000, let's say, right? And you'll probably maybe be able to do one transaction. You could do one property with that $150,000, because the amount, we're in Kansas City, just FYI. So for context, where I like to operate, where I like to play and do deals is B class, some C class areas, single family homes, and the average cost or the average, after repair value of that home is going to be $200, maybe up to $300,000. That's kind of our sweet spot. So if we have access to $150,000, and as I mentioned before, several lenders are cool loaning us that amount, so long as, okay, they get it back in 6 months, okay? And the other big stipulation is that they need to be in first lien position, okay? So that, as cool as it may seem, right? For me, when I first thought about that and I first started using short-term debt to acquire and renovate properties, that was super exciting. Well, as time goes on, we gain more experience. The economy changes, the market changes, interest rates go up, interest rates go down, inventory levels go up and go down, the cost of labor, material, things change. And so I quickly realized, okay, like, hey, initially that sounded cool, but okay, after doing it a handful of times, I started to see that, okay, if I want to grow a portfolio, that short-term debt could be very detrimental, okay? Because essentially I have, especially in today's market, like it's challenging to be able to get in and out. You gotta think about this. You're gonna purchase a property, you're gonna renovate it, and then within 6 to 12 months, you need to pay your lender back in full, okay? So, and FYI, that $150,000, they're gonna charge interest at whatever rate, 8 to 10, in some cases it's 10 to 15% interest, okay? So you gotta factor that in there too. So some lenders will have us, or they may have you, if you're actively investing or aspiring to do so, they may set it up to where they may defer the interest payments, okay? So a lot of times it's gonna be an interest-only loan, okay? And it's not fully amortized, and you got 6 to 12 months to pay it back in full. Well, during that 6 to 12 month period, you not only are paying for utilities and holding costs, okay? You're paying for at least part of the renovation, okay? If you can get in for a solid amount, and you can, keep your all-in amount. When I say all-in amount, I mean purchase and renovation at that 150,000 mark or below. Even if you do it that way, the lender usually is not going to loan you all the money up front. So you got to factor in, okay, I'm going to be paying holding costs, right? Utilities, okay? And then you got construction costs. Maybe your GC, maybe your contractor or rehab crew might front part of those costs, but if they do that, just know that they're gonna probably cost or charge more for that too, if they're gonna front you that money. So you have to, not only the holding costs, the utilities, I'm saying the interest payments to that lender, to that hard money lender or that private money lender is gonna need to be paid each month as well, okay? And then there's other charges. That's just, so we gotta read the fine print. So it's very important before you sign on the dotted line, before you borrow money, or before you partner up with a capital investor, you want to get as clear as you can with that firm or that individual, okay, how does this really look? How does this play out? Okay, you have investors, if you have a mentor, great. If the lender is willing to kind of push you and educate you and say, hey, here's what some of my current or past clients have done. That's how they handle it. But you get the idea. You got to understand how much money, the cost of the money, at what interest rate they're going to be charging you for using that money, and then how long do you have? Because you're already under the gun. The fact that you're taking on a renovation project, it's a wild card. Like things are going to happen, and then you couple that with paying the interest and the short, relatively short time frame, you put yourself under a lot of pressure. However, again, I've done it numerous times. I've helped investors do it, okay? that is probably one of the most common ways for fix and flippers or rehabbers or investors who are doing renovation projects use short-term debt, whether it's hard money or private money, okay? I think you get the idea. It could be very challenging, especially if you're doing multiple projects and you're looking to grow your enterprise, and then meanwhile, the market changes midway through 2, 3, 4 projects, however that looks for you. So you just have to be mindful, but that's what it is. The short-term debt, the hard money loans for purchase and rehab, okay, that's how we have been able to place capital or invest in real estate here in the Kansas City area, okay? So that can work. Again, it's gonna entail more time and energy and more risk, and you're gonna feel pressure, okay? So then I mentioned earlier partnership, joint venture partnership. That is another way that I've been able to take an individual's capital, okay, and we've been able to invest together alongside each other, okay? So when that happens, as I mentioned before, there's an LLC that gets put together or started or created at some point, hopefully up front, sometimes later on down the road. But that capital investor and me, or however you set it up, you could do the same thing. Just speaking for context here in Kansas City area, when I partnered up with multiple partners, they put up the money, okay? A lot of times they sign for the loans. Sometimes I sign for the loans. Again, it depends on how much capital, liquid capital, that the joint venture partner or your capital investor has to place or to utilize. Because, and again, I didn't know any better. Like, I did it a handful of times and thought, okay, cool, this is great. I've had multiple investment partners that have somewhere between $20,000 to $50,000 and, you know, upwards closer to $80,000, $90,000. And because I want to stay in my buy box, okay, that amount wasn't enough to cover the purchase of the property plus the renovation. So we had to leverage that, okay? And again, you could leverage the capital from a private money lender or perhaps a hard money lender, but it's going to be a little more tricky, a little more challenging. But for me and what I've seen, if you're going to use leverage, okay, you could do it in a joint venture partnership, and it's really still somewhat limited because if your investment partner only has enough to cover part of the purchase or part of the renovation, you're going to have to leverage it. So, however, if you're going to, you know, grow the thing and make it so it's more efficient, so safer and secure to get through the process, it'll behoove you to find a capital investor that you could partner with that has a larger amount of money, so that you don't necessarily have to leverage quite as often or at all, okay? Again, using the $200,000 or maybe up to $300,000 after repair value or current value of a single family home in and around Kansas City, B-class, what I consider B-class all day long, okay? If I have a capital investor that has $150,000 to $300,000, then we can more safely and securely put that capital to work. Heck, we might even be able to skip the renovation altogether and just either buy the house outright that's livable, move-in ready, or, okay, if they want to do multiple deals and they have $150,000 up to $300,000 or more, and they're okay using some type of leverage because they are a partner and because they're going to be owning the property with you, they can use, you know, 50 to 60 grand, maybe 30 grand, depending on the price point and the loan. You could use that as a down payment, okay? I have helped multiple clients do that over the years at my time as a real estate investor or as a real estate broker, helping other investors do that. They had access to 30 up to 100 grand. And, you know, I made it clear to them like, hey, you know, if you want to make this smooth and more efficient, more safe and secure, then, okay, I'd recommend just getting a house that's ready to go. You put the 20 to 25 or 30% down, the house is ready to go, and then boom, from there you can rent it out however you want to rent it, short-term, long-term, medium-term, or in our case, part of our strategy is to do seller financing. So buy the property, it's ready to go. Then from there, you could do some type of seller financing, okay? So those are the two main ways that I've been able to place capital, invest in real estate, okay? And, there are other ways to be able to do it, okay? If you are someone that has access to capital, or you're connected to someone that has capital, you don't necessarily have to be the one on the ground, either handling the operations or, overseeing the operations, because there's a lot that goes into buying a property, getting it rehabbed, getting it occupied, and then managing it from there. There's other ways to place capital. And whoever your colleagues are, it might be your capital, it could be someone else's capital. There are private lending opportunities. So you can use that money to then lend it to other practitioners, other real estate investors, that sort of thing, okay? But for most of us, I know for me, one of my main goals is to grow a portfolio of cash flowing, real estate investments, private notes, that sort of thing. So I realize that I have to be mindful and a little bit more cautious about how I'm using leverage or using debt, because if I'm planning to grow a portfolio and I want to keep these notes or rentals or seller finance homes for 5 to 10 years or perhaps even longer, then me going in, using short-term debt that has to be paid off in 6 to 12 months or perhaps 2 to 3 years, it could end up deterring me from growing my portfolio in a manner that I'd like, or it could in fact be detrimental because, I'm gonna have to refi, or I might have to sell a property, okay? Or I may have to exit somehow. I could bring in another capital investor, another business partner. You get the idea. If I'm keeping rentals, but I have short-term debt or mortgages that have balloons on them, then okay, I'm going to have to exit somehow in the future. So it's good to know that up front. Okay, so again, to reiterate, you got the short-term debt, okay? I didn't really get into the long-term debt so much, but I did in some previous videos, so definitely check those out. One of my favorite, ways to use money, if it's possible, is to have a lender be in first lien position, okay? And borrowing from them in a manner, or using a loan that's fully amortized, okay? So just to reiterate for those that may not quite get it, a lot of times the short-term debt, you're using the hard money loan or private money loan. A lot of times it's interest only on that monthly payment, okay? However, sometimes the lender may defer those payments so you don't have to make them out of pocket as you're paying for holding costs, renovation costs, and so forth. They may allow those interest payments to accumulate, and then once the project is done, you can refinance to pay off the short-term debt, or you can resell, you can exit, you can flip the property, and then at that point, hopefully there's enough to cover paying off the short-term debt, because unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't go that way on a rehab and resell project. Sometimes investors end up going over budget, past the deadline, to the point where they're able to exit and sell the property, but however, the proceeds aren't enough to cover the loan that they took out. So that's another reason why it's important to read the fine print, to dig in with your lender, whoever that is, ask certain questions. What's the cost of the money, the terms of the use, all that stuff, and then the due diligence being on point with the types of projects that you want to take on, because there's a lot of people that want to loan us money right now. However, if it's short-term debt, it's going to be risky, because again, that short-term debt has got to be paid off in full in 6 to 12 months, perhaps longer. But again, the interest only means that when you're making that monthly payment, either during the rehab and resale phase, or maybe after you refi or resell the property, as you're making those monthly payments, the interest payment, whether it's made each month or accumulates and you get hit on the back end, those payments aren't going to pay down the loan. That's like, it's interest only. So if someone loans me $150,000 and it's a short-term loan, it's a hard money loan, even though I'm making payments, right? Or the interest is accruing, right? That 150 at the end of the project is still there. I didn't pay it down. I just was making interest payments. Whereas with the long-term debt, as I alluded to earlier, one of my favorite things to do, especially if the situation calls for it, if it makes sense, or if the partner or lender has deep enough pockets to be able to support that, they can loan me money. Actually, they're loaning money to my LLC, okay? And they're in first lien position. My favorite thing to do is to set it up to where those monthly payments go towards principal and interest. So each month or each payment that I make is paying down the debt, okay? And on that long-term note, right? That long-term private mortgage, however it's set up, right? There's no pressure for me to pay it off in 6 to 12 months or 2 to 3 years because it's fully amortized, okay? So short-term debt, interest only, not fully amortized. The long-term debt, okay, whether it's 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, or 30 years, because it's fully amortized, because it's in first lien position, right? I can go in knowing that, hey, I can ride this thing out. I'm not under the gun. I don't have as much pressure to exit in 6 months or 2 years, and I can, more efficiently grow the portfolio, okay? So keep that in mind. I want y'all to be able to understand the different types of funding and financing and ways that you can use private capital, private equity, okay? So on the long-term side, again, I want to take this a little bit further, okay? Because I mentioned earlier, if you have an investment partner or a capital investor, AKA joint venture partnership, that capital investor owns the LLC with you, okay? Which that LLC owns the property that you acquire, okay? If you're gonna use long-term debt and you want to stretch the capital a little bit further, instead of doing one deal with a capital investor that has $150,000, I can do 2 or 3 deals, and we, instead of purchasing the property outright for cash, we can get a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, and we can put 20 to 30% down, and we can do multiple deals with that, okay? And because they're a partner, hopefully you have it set up a certain way so that the money that they put up, okay, you're gonna get a mortgage for the property, okay? The LLC, the entity that holds the property, is the entity that gets the loan. So the loan's not going to you or your partner. The loan goes to the entity, which is your LLC, hopefully, right? So, and hopefully it's a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, okay? You can go a little bit further and do a few deals or a couple deals, like I said, and hopefully the down payment and whatever you pay yourself to hopefully you're paying yourself to operate the business. You got fees, closing costs in there. Hopefully that, 50 to 70 or 50 to 80 grand that it's gonna take to do one single family home in and around Kansas City. Hopefully the money that comes from your capital investor, since they're your partner, hopefully that isn't getting hit or being charged a certain interest rate, okay? So you gotta be mindful. Again, just because you got a partner with some money, you gotta still, dig in and ask certain questions, because sometimes the money that your capital investor has is being charged. So they may have borrowed that money from somewhere else, or it could be a line of credit, and maybe they told you before, maybe you forgot. It's happened to me a couple times. And so this is how I'm able to, share this stuff with y'all out there, because, I've been through some challenges, of course. But knowing where that money came from is key, whether you're borrowing it or whether you're partnering with someone. And again, how much does it cost? Is it cost anything? Is it being charged a certain rate? Does it need to be paid back in a certain amount of time? Those are the key factors to keep in mind. All right, so I know I went a little bit longer today, and I think it is important because especially now in today's market, I know I'm gearing up, and I think there's other people out there who have kind of been on the sideline and they're waiting for opportunities to come their way. Well, you can learn this stuff, do your own research, do your own homework so that you'll be better prepared to invest and create that time freedom and create that wealth and that cash flow or that financial independence or the freedom, whatever it is you choose to create, that much more efficiently. All right, so and part of doing your own research, doing your own homework, there are a couple people that I want to shout out. Okay, one for sure is John Burley, who I do consider a mentor. It was 2 years ago that I went to a couple of his events. I read one of his books. His people and his program for raising capital and placing it effectively via real estate is bar none. I think those are some of the greatest investors and one of the greatest programs on the planet. So for those who are serious about it, don't take my word from it. I learned from John Burley, and then there's another person I want to shout out who wrote an amazing book. He's got an amazing program, which I have not joined, but his name is Hunter Thompson. Hunter Thompson, okay? Those are two guys who I look up to and respect in the real estate community, especially when it comes to raising private capital, okay? And coming up with ways to place that capital effectively. So definitely check me out. I'm active on social media. I got quite a few videos where I talk about capital strategy and operations for real estate investors and real estate practitioners. But as you're doing your homework and reaching, seeking out guidance and wisdom from other people who've gone before us, those two guys, I highly recommend, John Burley and Hunter Thompson. Shout out to you guys if you ever see this video. Appreciate you guys. But yeah, that's it for today. Appreciate you tuning in. Be sure to comment, like, and subscribe if you want, and I'll see you on the next one. All right, take care. Peace.